Welcome to Discovering the Real God, and this is the final part of what God is like. We can never stop discovering God. We'll be the whole of eternity discovering God and still not discover Him completely. We'll never know everything about God. If God was so small that we could learn all about Him, then He wouldn't be big enough to meet our deep eternal needs. So let's go. But Jesus said, "Whoa." Then that was a word of judgment. It was a word of condemnation. It was almost like saying, "Oh no, look at what you like. Oh no, is it possible that you could be so bad, so wicked, so hypocritical?" So Jesus was everything that we know Him to be. He was gentle, He was kind, He had the most wonderful compassion. He had compassion that we can't even imagine. His heart broke. And when He saw even a crowd of people that were hungry, that had followed Him all day, He wanted them to be fed. He didn't want them to walk home hungry. Then again, when they came the next day, He said, "You've not come because of the word I've spoken. You've come because your bellies were filled." He knew man inside out. There was nothing that you could tell Jesus about the heart of man. And it's the same now. There's nothing that you can tell God about the heart of man. The heart of man is wicked. Even, would you believe it really, that deceitful. We don't know our own motives. The Bible tells us that the heart of man is deceitful and desperately wicked, and we do not know why we do what we do. We do it because we think we're doing it for the purest motive, but very often we're not. So God knows us. This is the God that we worship. He knows us inside out. We say it sounds cliched, but please take it to heart. Especially in these closing days of time, we need to get right with God. The church needs to repent of the way that they have gone on their own schemes, on their own plans, built buildings to the glory of man. And they've got these schemes and plans, and some of them are so, commendable. But has God led the way? If He hasn't, then it doesn't bring glory to Him. It brings glory back to man. So God's slow to anger. It's a good thing to talk about really when we're coming to the end of time. God's anger. He controls His anger. He's long-suffering. But when He does release that anger, when He does unleash it, it's at His fiercest. But it's never too late. Look at Ahab, the most wicked king. But when God saw that he had humbled himself, He thought, "Oh, I'm going to change my mind. I'm not going to bring the devastation on Ahab that I was going to do. I'm going to defer it." It wasn't too late even then. And it's not too late for us. It's never too late. If you think it's too late, it's not. If you think you've done something that, God can't deal with, that it's nonsense. That's a lie from the pit of hell. God can deal with anything as long as you're prepared to go to Him, as long as you're prepared to humble yourself, like Ahab did. The funny thing, isn't it? God tells us not to kill. He says thou shalt not kill in his commandments, which are still very valid today, of course. It's woven through the epistles, it's woven through what Jesus said about love and the Good Samaritan. It's all in there. He says do not kill, but yet if you look at Genesis 38, Judah had a son called Er. And God saw that he was wicked, so God killed him. And Er's brother Onan, or Onan, whichever way you pronounce it, he was to take up Er's place and produce children in Er's name, but he wouldn't do that. So God killed him as well. Read it. God just killed him. Ananias and Sapphira in the New Testament. God didn't mess about. He killed them. God hates lying. And he can't lie himself. But he used lies. 1 Kings 22. I will go and be a lying spirit in the mouths of the prophet. God says, yeah, that'll work. That'll work. You go do that. That wasn't a request, by the way. Anything from God is a command. When God speaks, it's a command. Let's get that under our skin. If nothing else, if you've learnt nothing at all from what I've said in all of this series about what God's like, get that under your skin. God never, ever, ever requests. Anything from God is a command. And it's because of his authority. Because his ways are higher than ours. His thoughts are higher than ours. As far as the heavens are above the earth. That's how high God is from us. We can't measure that, in other words. He's so high as to be in command, even though we think he might have requested sometimes. No. He assumes that you have received it as a command because he is who he is and we are who we are. We are dust. We're from the dust, we go back to the dust. When God speaks, it's a command. Always, 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 always. So he will use lies for his own advantage. He doesn't play by our rules. He doesn't play by the rules he set for us. He does what pleases him. If it suits him to do it, because he is righteous, if God does it, then it's righteous. It's difficult to understand that, isn't it? But if God does it to suit his purpose is righteousness. His purpose is love. He does everything out of a pure motive. When we can't do that, we can't be like that because there's always some underlying evil, if you like, within us. We have that old nature comes bubbling to the surface and we do things. We don't do it out of a pure heart like God does, like Jesus did. There are times when we do things well, but many, many times we don't. If we do things out of that sacrificial love, God is very, very pleased. God hates whores and whoredom. It's funny actually that he used Rahab the prostitute at Jericho. It's a strange thing. And the enemy of God, the Moabites, Ruth was brought in to be part of the lineage of Christ. You can't understand God in that sense. God hates whoredom, yet physical and spiritual whoredom, he absolutely hates it. And that's why there was the death penalty for adultery. Not for fornication, but for adultery. God absolutely hates that. And he will deal with the adulterer himself in the end. But he instructed Hosea to marry a wife of whoredoms for his purpose. God gave Satan permission to wipe out Job's family, to attack his person in the most horrendous affliction, just to prove his point. That Job was his man. He knew Job's heart. And he used it to prove his point. And he's using it now. It wasn't just for then. It wasn't just in heaven where the angels only can hear. It's for now. The whole world from that point to now could know the story of Job. That's our God. I've finished the study now, but it doesn't mean to say we understand God. You have to understand someone to have a relationship with them, to see how they tick. And that's the same of us with God. The more we know about him, the closer we can get. You know, I've heard preachers say, you can have as much of God as you want. I've heard them from the platform. You can have as much of God as you want. Oh, no, you can't. No, you can't. You can't carry on the same old way and expect God to come near to you. You've got to go near to God, and to get near a holy God, you have to be holy. Think about that in human terms. If someone says, oh, I want to be a friend of yours, and you don't particularly like the way they are, then how are they ever going to get close to you? They can have as much as you as you allow them to have. It's the same with any relationship. You can't have as much of God as you want. You have to humble yourself before God and hope that he notices you, and hope that he wants to draw you in. You can't do it any other way. That's the God we're dealing with. Please take that message away. That we have to live according to the way that God gave us to live. Otherwise, those are the basics. Those are the basics. And until you do that, you'll never go any further. Ever, ever, ever. If you want to do something for God, that's great, that's wonderful. But why do you want to do something for God? Is it you or is it God? Let's put that on you. You know, is it your ambition? Great. Well, let it be your ambition to humble yourself before God and do what he has asked you to do. So we've come to the close now, and I hope it's given a little bit of an insight into what God's like. Perhaps you knew all along exactly what he was like, and you've not had to stretch your imagination to see, because we'll never really know until we see him. But it gives us an insight. We need that insight to get to know God, so we can have that intimate relationship with him. We can never have that intimate relationship with him until we know him, until we actually start to conform to his will. Because you can't get close to God until you reach out with the right attitude, and then he'll come back to you. But it has to be in the right attitude. You have to meet his criteria. You have to humble yourself. You have to live according to how he has commanded you to live. That is the only way you can get close to God. That's the only way that you will be used mightily of God. to become an empty vessel so that God himself can fill you and he can do exactly what he desires to do and receive all, not some, all of the glory, all of the praise, all of the accolades, and that you are humble, I am humble, to the degree that we want nothing for ourselves. Not easy, because of our fallen nature. But I'll leave that with you, and we'll see you the next time. It will be a different subject then. See you soon. Bye.